The 1947 alleged alien space crash in Roswell, New Mexico, sparked national interest about UFOs. Well, fast forward to 1952, and the nation was sent into another extraterrestrial frenzy with the Washington flyover. On July 19, 1952, an air traffic controller reported seeing 7 unidentified flying objects. A week later, UFOs were seen above the White House, also the Capitol. Air Force fighter jets weren't fast enough to catch them, and later the government said they were weather-related incidents, but new research suggests otherwise.
Seems that there is a strong correlation between multiple transients and UFO events, and that in case we can show this correlation in a strong way, we would actually find support for that we see that UFOs are related to artificial objects.
News Nation special correspondent Ross Coulthart talks with a physicist and astronomer studying artificial objects in space in his latest episode of News Nation's Reality Check podcast. Right now, the link to Reality Check with Ross Coulthart is live. All you got to do, take out your phone right now, scan that QR code at the bottom of your screen here. You can also visit News Nation's website or YouTube page to get that link. Okay, joining me now, we have Ross Coulthart with us live this morning. Ross, good morning to you. You've piqued our interest, as usual. You talked to this doctor. What's her hypothesis about what happened?
Good morning, Marky. Well, it's a fascinating story. It's a case of now you see it, now you don't. Beatrice Villarol, Dr. Beatrice Villarol, is based in Sweden, and she had this very clever idea of looking at photographs that were taken before human satellites went into orbit, so before Sputnik in 1957. And she happened to look at photographic glass plates that were taken by the Palomar Observatory in California, and she looked in the exact weekends for the 2 flyover periods over Washington, D.C., and she found 1 minute it was not there, and half an hour later on these glass plate slides, it was there. There were these objects in orbit. Maybe way out in deep space. We don't know how far out they were, but Dr. Villarol hypothesizes, she can't say categorically, she hypothesizes that there might be a link with the weekend incidents on the 2 weekends, consecutive weekends in 1952, for what is and remains America's biggest and most mysterious UFO sighting over the national capital. And it's fascinating because these glass plates show these objects were there in a half-hour period and then they were gone. And this was over 2 weekends.
Yeah.
Just 30 minutes apart.
You and I have talked extensively about UFOs, UAPs. What exactly is an artificial object in space?
Well, an artificial object is like for us, it's our satellites. It's satellites, rockets, any kind of terrestrial technology that's been put up there. And what's clever about Dr. Villarol's research is she recognized that before 1957, before the Soviets beat us with their Sputnik satellite, there was nothing up there, at least nothing that we knew about. And so it's possible to look at those glass plate negatives and compare them with present day photographs and see whether there's anything that isn't there that should be if they were genuine photographs of the night sky. And so an artificial object is something that frankly can't be explained by a planet, a meteor, or a star. And what she's discovered is that there are these objects, and she calls them transients. They're there 1 minute and they're gone the next. And so there is a possibility that what they are, is some kind of spacecraft.
And what about space debris? I think you touched on this too. Back in the 1950s, there was very little space debris as compared to now. What's changed?
Well, in the 1950s, before 1957, there was absolutely none, because we didn't have any objects. We hadn't put anything into space before 1957. So that's what's so special about these early photographic images. They are clear, high-resolution images taken by some of America's top observatories of what the night sky looked like back then. And we can compare that with the present day and see whether there are any objects that have disappeared off those slides. And there are, and that's the fascinating thing about this work, it raises the possibility that there were objects in Earth orbit on the very weekends that we had one of the biggest UFO sightings in American history.
I will now recognize Mr. Moskowitz for a 5-minute introduction.
Thank you, Chairwoman. Good morning.
There is a document that will be entered into the congressional record today. Mr. Tim Burchett from Tennessee has this document, and we just distributed it to every member up here on the dais of this document. But this is going to be the original document from the Pentagon about Immaculate Constellation that Michael Schellenberger delivered to Congress today. So thank you, Mr. Schellenberger, for this information. We are all reading it in real time now, and Mr. Burchett will enter it into the record. But 12 pages about this unacknowledged special access program that your government says does not exist.
Thank you very much, Chairwoman. I want to thank the Chairwoman and the Chairman both for their continued support.
The first section talks about the unacknowledged special access program called Immaculate Constellation, and the second section about USG imagery intelligence. And Representative Luna just told me if I say Immaculate Constellation, I'll be on some list, maybe a FISA warrant. So come at me, bro, I guess. But
in a time of heightened distrust of our government institutions, I believe more transparency is not only needed, but is possible. And obviously we can respect national security limits, but we also have to provide our constituents with the information and oversight that they have tasked us for.
Has there been any, to your knowledge, any communication with a non-human life form?
So the term communication is a bit of a trick word because there's verbal communication like we're having now. The problem is you also have nonverbal communication. And so I would say definitively yes, but from a nonverbal meaning, when a Russian reconnaissance aircraft comes into U.S. airspace, we scramble 2 F-22s, and we are certainly communicating intent and capability. I think the same goes with this. We have these things that are being observed over controlled U.S. airspace, and they're not really doing a good job hiding themselves. They're making it pretty obvious they have the ability to even interfere with our nuclear equities.
our third witness is Mr. Michael Schellenberger, founder of the newsletter Public.
Our best tool for unlocking the mystery of UAP is science, but we cannot conduct a proper inquiry if the stigma is so overwhelming that just daring to be part of a NASA research team elicits such a vitriolic response. Therefore, one of the most important actions that can be taken relative to exposing the truth of UAP is to combat the stigma. And this is where I believe that NASA can be eminently helpful.
Our first witness is retired Rear Admiral Tim Gallaudet, who retired from the U.S. Navy and is now the chief.
As the saying goes, the truth is out there. We just need to be bold enough and brave enough to face it.
Mr. Burchett for 5 minutes of questions.
Thank you, Chair Lady. I request unanimous consent to enter into the record